Good afternoon, students. Now that you've done your literary review, you now should have a good understanding of the theoretical implications, problems, and parties of your conflict. You should also have some idea of the solutions that have been tried, and maybe even an idea of some of the solutions that can be tried in the future. But now you'll move into the active exploration section of this project. In this part of the project, what you have learned theoretically will now meet reality. But before we can go into the field, we must prepare ourselves. We must have a plan. This is very much like a football coach who sends scouts out to discover what the other teams do, who puts together a game plan, for he knows that without a plan, his game will look awful. And the same thing is here. Without a plan, your active exploration will look awful. And this is the most important part of your research site part. So we will now move to how we are going to prepare for active exploration. Active exploration, as you can see, is looking for information. Notice Sherlock Holmes will be joining us on our journey of active exploration, and even Sherlock Holmes has a plan. If the great detective Sherlock Holmes needed a plan to solve his mysteries, so do you. Now that you have finished the theoretical literary review section of your project, you will now take your work into the field of the real world. And what you may discover is that what you learned in theory doesn't, doesn't coincide side by side with exactly what you're going to find in the world. But still, the theoretical research you did should help you have develop your plan in the act of exploration. The goal of your research will be to better understand the specific positions and interests of the parties involved in the conflict. And the parties in this case do not include just the leaders, just the organizations. It also includes the people at the bottom, the population that is impacted by this issue or by the issue that you chose. Your goal is to come up with proposals for solutions that you will later present to the impacted people and to their leadership that will be acceptable to both sides of the conflict. Keep in mind that you may be able to resolve only certain elements of the conflict. As you will discover, there are some issues which may not be solvable due to strongly held beliefs. There are certain things that are not solvable. It does not mean that your project is a total loss. What it means that you will solve what you can solve, and you will leave open for a later date as things progress and things mature in the future to solve issues in the future. Things do change. For instance, Rabin lost his first prime ministership to the fact that planes landed in Israel on Shabbat. But today, Ben Gurion Airport works, when there's no corona, of course, Shabbat after Shabbat after Shabbat, and only closes down on Yom Kippur. So things do change, and solving problems that we cannot solve today these certain specific issues may be solved in the future. The the difficulty in ability to solve certain problems today is especially true when the issues resolve around core issues as per religion and culture. The stronger held the belief, the stronger held the cultural aspect, of and the emotional aspect of the issue, and the specific part of the issue, the harder it will be to solve. The practical issues are quite often easy to solve, but when emotion and belief, which are neither rational or always understandable, come into play, we are not always able to solve these issues without difficulty. Your goal will be to find the issues that can be resolved and to work on those issues first. Once agreement and trust has been obtained by the solving of some issues, it will be easier to bridge some of the other gaps, either in part or fully. Do not start off with the hardest issues when you come to your solutions part of the project. You need to solve the quote unquote easier parts, build trust between the parties, and then try to move on to something else. The harder issues. Do not try to move too quickly, because if you move too quickly and you get to a wall, people may decide, I agreed on it before, but if this issue is now being discussed, I'm taking everything off the table. Do not push too hard on one hand, but on the other hand, do not do not hesitate in trying to feel if you can actually approach that issue. If you feel the issue is approachable, if it is a core belief or cultural issue, approach it gently. If you feel that it's going to cause too much resistance, back off and solve it at a later date or at a later stage, if at all. So basically, you're going to have to turn a plan into me. And this part of my lesson is called making a plan. For first of all, you need to give me a list of who are the parties to the conflict. The parties can be parts of society, they can be individuals, and they can be politicians. You need to say, too, who are the leaders of the different factions involved in the conflict. You need to go to the leaders. People will follow their leaders. These can be either religious, social, or political individuals or groups. And these groups are also known as NGOs, non government organizations, otherwise known in Hebrew as Amutot. 3. For each of the bodies in number 2 above, you must chart their known attitudes, positions, and interests which you learned about during your literary theoretical section that you've already written. Continuing with making a plan. Decide what type of information you need to get from the bodies or individuals involved. Every question you ask has to have a purpose. If you want to know whether a certain solution will be acceptable, what a certain attitude is, the question and the way you ask that question has to be put together in such a way that you will obtain the information. If I want to know if somebody is religious, I will not ask them, do you live in Bet Shemesh? I will ask them, are you secular, traditional, national religious, Haredi? And then if you want to know what type of Haredi, Litai, Haredi Moderni, or you can talk about Hasidi, what type of Hasidi as well. So basically, what do you want to know? Your question, if just because a lot of people in Bet Shemesh are religious, asking somebody, do you live in Bet Shemesh, does not answer the question if they're religious. There are plenty of Chilonim that also live in Bet Shemesh. I know the example I just gave is a very simple example, but really think about the way you're asking the question, and if it's an open question and not a closed question, make sure the way the question is stated leads people to answer it in a way that gives you the type of information that you want. Next, in number 5, write a list of questions that will help you obtain the information, either multiple choice questions, okay, or open questions. With open questions, be careful that they lead the person to answering in a certain way, to giving certain information on the one hand, but don't make it so it leads them to answer information only in one way. So usually the closed questions will be easier in terms of a survey. So again, write a list of questions that will help you obtain the information you need from the bodies and the individuals that are considered leaders in the conflict. Making a plan, we continue. 6, the leading people and bodies involved in the conflict also tend to represent different segments in the population. And you will need to plan to do a survey of these segments. So when you're going to interview certain people, you're going to put together a list of questions for those people. But it is not enough to interview the leaders. You need to interview the population. At this point, you will put together a survey of the questions you want to ask the population. However, first interview the movers and shakers who are involved. And that survey may change. Once you interview the important people, the important organizations, the leaders, you may find yourself in a situation later on where you will want to revise, to change your survey. You will later compare the results of the surveys you do from the populations to that of the supposed leaders. Sometimes the results of the leaders and of the population they represent will not be the same, and you will try to discover why. Sometimes the interest of the leadership may be different than that of the population that they supposedly represent. Next, for when you do your personal interviews, you're not going to do a survey. Those will be questions and it will be in an interview. But when you do a survey, you will prepare a survey to be used via Google Forms on the populations that are impacted by the issue. Your final survey will be done only once you interview the leadership. What I need for you to prepare at this time is a Google Forms survey that you think will be the basis for the survey that you will do later on. Okay? But it will probably change after you interview the people, the leaderships and the organizations that represent the different segments that are impacted in the populations that are impacted by the issue that you have chosen. Again, make a list of questions that center around the core issues and values that you have discovered. You should use the same survey on the various segments of the population. This is the tricky part. You need to use the same survey if you're trying to survey Dati Leumi, Haredi, secular, and traditional Jews. Of course, the first question will be, are you Haredi, Haredi Litai, Haredi Moderni? I'll teach you the different elements within the Haredi community. We'll see how far we want to spread it out depending on the issue, how many segments you want to get in there. But you will basically ask them, so you'll be able to collect the surveys and put it together based on the different sections, the different slices in the population that you're collecting on. Your questions, again, and I say this number 8, and I say it very, very emphatically. Your questions must be geared, they must be structured to obtaining the information you seek. They have to be wide enough to allow for a variety of answers, but they have to be specific enough to gather the information that you want. You really have to know exactly what type of information that you want. Come up with a plan as to how you plan to get people to fill out the survey. How are you going to do it? You got a survey, you have a tool now to gather information. Again, remember, what is the goal of this tool? In the active exploration stage, your tools, your interviews, and your surveys are designed to gather information in order that you can come up with proposals of solutions that you will present to the leaderships of the different populations. And you may decide to do a second survey based on what do you think, these are the things that we might suggest. What do you think about them before you go and actually do your final meeting? But we'll talk about that at a later date. So how can we get the information? We got this survey, great survey. We put it together on Google Forms. We know how we're going to dissect it later on and get the information out of it later on. And then we said, okay, now I got to take this survey that I've developed and I have to get it into the hands of the people who have to fill it out. So how do we do this? This may be done by having certain people disseminate, to spread the survey, or by using certain social media outlets used by various groups that are parties to the conflict. For instance, if I know if there's a Facebook, you can go into a Facebook group of national religious people, or people who are active in the secular community and they're really into secular things. Okay, they're activists and they're in a certain, and you say we are students doing research on such and such from a high school. Would you please fill out the survey for us so we can do our project for our Bagrut? And that is totally acceptable. Okay. I want to know at this. I don't want you to do it at this point. What I want you to do is tell me, where are you going to put your survey and how are you going to get it filled out? Okay. So this is your plan, and this plan you have to have turned into me. Okay, then, sorry, making a plan. 10, prepare a schedule to be followed. It means on such and such a day I'm doing this, and the next day I'm doing this, and the next day I'm doing this. You need to have your active exploration completed by May the 1st. This plan, what you're going to do now, okay, must be turned in by April the 12th, not June. I wrote here accidentally by June. I will correct it for you later on. By April the 12th, 2020. That is the date by which the plans and the surveys and the questions have to be filled out by. I apologize for the mistake. Meeting and approval. You will be meeting via Zoom on April the 14th, 2020 with your teacher to approve your plan. Once your plan is approved, your active exploration will begin. Okay? And of course, I wish you the best of luck. Have a good day.